Welcome back. Well, no, how many times you see this video, it is just shocking to look at. Right now, recovery efforts are back underway in Baltimore. This morning, after that cargo ship hit the Francis Scott Key Bridge, the bridge crumbled within seconds. And later, authorities say 2 people were pulled out alive. 1 is in critical, 1 was fine, which is hard to imagine. 6 construction workers who were with that same group, they were filling potholes on the bridge. All of them are now presumed dead. Officials say police were able to stop traffic miraculously in both directions right before the bridge collapsed. They literally had seconds to make that happen.
Yeah.
Well, the recent bridge collapse renews fears that some people have, and it's a genuine fear, right? That you have a fear of driving over bridges. It has a name. It's called gephyrophobia. No idea where those names come from, but imagine it's got some kind of Greek root to it probably, right? But it's the fear not only of bridges, but also going through tunnels. And our good friend, licensed mental health counselor Shantala Boss is with us this morning to talk more about it. Great to have you with us.
Hi, Shantala. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
You know, this is such an interesting thing because people have phobias to a lot of things, whether it be, you know, reptiles, spiders, or snakes, heights, that kind of thing.
Public speaking, I always think of that one as a big one. Yeah.
But bridges specifically, and I know that Amy was saying that one of her girlfriends has this specific phobia. How common is it?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned heights because bridges actually are a lot of different phobias. It's a height, it's a fear of confined spaces, it's a fear of drowning the water. So it's really a bigger phobia than we think because you can have little specific phobias and then they kind of all come together. I don't think we often think about it because often we don't go over really big bridges. We usually have smaller bridges. But a bridge such as this, can be very common. Honestly, I've had that phobia, not to the extreme where I can't go, but I'll roll the windows down when I go over a bridge. I've done that for a while, actually ever since the Skyway collapsed back in the day. I've kind of developed that. And it's not truly a phobia. If you just have a little anxiety, you have a little coping mechanism you do, and you kind of just get through it. But it can become full-blown if you avoid these things or have very physical sensations, are constantly thinking about it. So it depends. I know we took a poll earlier, and probably a lot of people right now have a fear, but for it to fully develop into a phobia, it takes several different things.
And if you want to go ahead and answer that poll, you see that little QR code there in the bottom right of your screen. Just go ahead and take a little shot of that, and then they'll take it to the poll, and you can answer the poll, because I'd be really curious to know how many people truly do have this phobia.
Well, and I think, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, people say, oh, I have a fear of flying, right? And people will say, well, you know, you're more likely to die in a car crash than you are in a plane. But that doesn't really help you get over the phobia. Like just throwing facts at people, right? Like, oh, the likelihood of that happening. That doesn't help the phobia go away. And one of the things that you and I talked about in the 9 o'clock hour, which I thought was interesting, was the baby steps, right? And we were joking that it, you know, reminds me of the movie What About Bob with Bill Murray.
Yes.
But it's so true that if you expose yourself to things that you fear, that it makes it less fearful, right?
It really does. Humans are so resilient. We look at people that go through things and we think, how do they do that? I could have never done that. But they've been exposed to things. They develop coping strategies going through it. Everybody's very specific in the coping strategies that they can handle or the coping strategies they use. Sometimes we don't know what they are until we actually face a situation. We go in with information, you know, we can talk about those coping strategies, but a lot of times we don't really know what they are until we're in it. And that's why people get through trauma.
Right.
Humans are resilient.
So let me ask you, where do phobias come from? I think because, you know, for me, you talked about the fear of flying. I don't necessarily have a fear of flying itself, but I can't sleep because I think my brain power is what's keeping the plane in the air. So I feel like I have to stay awake.
Right, that's helping the pilot.
You know, I'm helping you. So I don't know how I'm helping you, but I'm helping you keep that plane in the air, right? But where do phobias come from?
There's so many different places they can come from. That's what psychotherapy is about, is talking about your history. Because when you actually get into it and really talk, there's so many different connections in our life. And it can be very specific. You were in a plane crash, or you had some secondary trauma and knew someone that was in a plane crash. But it could also be you know, maybe you have anxiety in general, and then you kind of just developed this on the plane. You were thinking something. You know, trauma response is all related to our sensory response. So sometimes if we have a smell thing, hear thing, something happens.
It triggers something.
It does, and we didn't even know what it was, and then we relate it to the plane. I hope you weren't in a plane crash ever, but
I'm flying tomorrow, so.
Oh no, we're talking about it. We're talking about it.
But talking about it is helpful because so you talked about you know with bridges. What about you, Ames? Do you have a phobia?
I do. You know, it's funny. You're going to laugh. I worked at the Grand Canyon when I was in college, but I do have a fear of heights or being close to an edge. And I mean,
have that a little bit too. Yeah.
Part of that, right, though, Shantala, is what I would call a natural fear because those fears are built in so that we don't fall off of a cliff. I mean, right, there are certain things we should naturally be
but some people don't
afraid
have that because they get right up to the edge and they lean over.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
and that's how they fall.
That's how they fall.
But don't you think that part of that is just natural, like that we're supposed to be fearful of certain things?
Anxiety helps everyone in certain situations.
Okay.
It protects us and it helps us achieve things. It's when it gets to a point where we can't function or daily living. And that is when it becomes a true problem. So really looking at that and figuring out how to cope.
So it's one thing to have a phobia, but how do you know when you need to seek help for this phobia? Like it's gotten to the point where it's just out of control.
Well, if we're ruminating about it, thinking about it, unable to go over bridges, or you know, you were talking about your friend earlier who, you know, needs her husband to drive over the bridge. Those type of situations, you probably need to seek help. If you know, you're trying to take those baby steps and it's not working, you're trying to do those coping strategies and it's still not helping you, well, therapists can help you in exposure, responsive prevention. They can help you in visualization. All these things can help us through that. Even if we aren't necessarily crossing the bridge with our therapist, they can help us in certain techniques.
Yeah.
So really it's when, and usually they say it's been going on for more than 6 months, it's impeding your daily functioning.
Well, and some people will medicate themselves, right, to go on a plane. They're like, oh, I can't, I'm so nervous to go on the plane. They have to take something to settle them down, like a Valium or something. But that you can't do that if you're driving over a bridge. You can't be on Valium, right?
Well, that's the worst thing.
Exactly. Now
all your faculties.
Right, so now we're creating even more of a danger for other people.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so yes, there is medication, but you really have to learn to, it's really about
and medication
learning
should
to
be
control
temporary.
it. Sure.
I would guess.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm not a psychiatrist, but
Yeah.
if you have a generalized, usually the phobias are under an umbrella of generalized anxiety disorder. So if you have a generalized anxiety disorder, SSRI can be helpful, and it's not necessarily going to help in that minute, but it can help in general with you developing better coping strategies, because sometimes our brain gets stuck when we're anxious.
Right.
So sometimes medication can be assistance in short term, like you said.
All right. Sounds good. Shantala, always good information.
We're going to get Danielle to watch What About Bob, and then we're going to come back and do another segment on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet.
I want to see it again.
I'll watch it on the plane.
There you go.
Listen, I'm going to be awake anyway. So I'll watch What About Bob on the plane tomorrow.
It's a classic. It's a classic.
All right. We want to hear from you about your bridge anxiety. As we said, so are you afraid of bridges? Take our poll, QR code right there. Go ahead and scan it, and we're going to check the answers at the end of
Look at
our
that.
show.
We've made more people more fearful because the number has gone up since we started talking about it.
My
right?
gosh, look at that.
Yeah.
Wow.
See?
We'll be
All
right
right.
back. Why, isn't that something?
It's